Okay, so this one's interesting. It's been announced this week that if you want to play Resident Evil 4 Remake on the iPhone 15 Pro or Pro Max, you're basically going to be paying full price for it, $60. Now, Oliver, you've just bought a new iPhone. You're really excited to playing these games on your phone. What do you make of this price point? I mean, it's kind of excessive based on mobile gaming prices, but at the same time, there's more to it than that, isn't there? I think it's the bottom line.
Yes, I have an iPhone 15 Pro right here. So
Ooh.
I'm looking forward to hopefully playing some of these games in due course when they're released later this year. But yeah, I think the pricing question is interesting because I think it depends on whether you see it as a console game or a mobile game ultimately. To me, I see it as more of a console game. I think people are used to paying very little upfront for mobile titles, and they're not so used to just the pay to play game model that we see so much on consoles. But I think given the fact that most phone games nowadays are not so good with their monetization, including efforts from like Square Enix with their new Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis game. That game has awful monetization. So I think that this is a good move. I think the exception in mobile gaming at the moment, at least in my eyes, would be Apple Arcade, which is very similar to Game Pass. That has some very good games on it, but most games are not shipping in a very good state, in a state that's interesting to me or a lot of other primarily console or PC gamers, right? So
Hmm.
I'd prefer to have these releases at full price than not to have them at all. And I also think something that helps ease the pain in this situation is the fact that the $60 price refers to an in-app purchase in this case. So you actually get to play a substantial portion. We don't know how much, but a substantial portion of the game will be made available for free. So you might play through like the first chapter, right, as a free download, and then have to pony up if you actually enjoy the experience, which I think is totally fair. For that $60 price, you get the game across all iOS platforms, so iPad
Hmm.
and iPhone, and also Mac computers as well. To me, at
Hmm.
least, I think it's totally fair.
Same.
Fair enough. Well, we got this question from Everyone's a Winner. Hey, DF team, trying to understand who Apple sees as the market for the AAA games on an iPhone thing. The tech seems super cool, but the business model doesn't yet make sense to me. Is it for folks who only play Fortnite on their phones who then realize they can get a USB-C to HDMI cable and a controller and have a living room gaming experience without needing a console? That idea seems kind of a stretch. But in the same right, I can't see anyone actually wanting to play RE4 with phone screen touch controls on the go. It just feels like it's all missing something as a plan going forward for Apple to stick with. I think the plan is fairly straightforward, and it is to. It's early days, right? But the idea is to basically consolidate an ecosystem, right, that encompasses all areas of Apple. They've done it with the silicon, right? Why not move it into games and where you can play them? So, the M1, it started with the M1, I guess, on the iPhones, where we actually started to see the fact that Apple was rolling its own silicon in the laptop space and then into the desktop space.
Sure.
And there's a huge degree of functionality. Sorry, a sort of how can I explain it? It's the same technology essentially rolled out to different platforms. So the idea, I think, is quite compelling to a developer to say, hey, let's get this game out. It's not just for Mac, which has a very limited market size, but also for iOS, which is huge. So even if only a certain degree, a small amount of people actually buy the games, it does increase the concept of viability on the iOS and macOS platforms. I think that's actually quite compelling. In terms of the USB-C dongle and the touch screen controls, Oliver, I mean, you can have controllers that work with iPhones, right?
Yeah. Basically, any controller that supports Bluetooth works really well with iPhones. I actually have a couple like sliding controllers that fit the iPhone in between, like a kind of switch tablet, right?
Hmm.
And those work really well. I think it's totally fair, especially with these newer iPhones. Actually, the display out to a TV is actually very good.
Mm.
Like it's uncompressed 4K 60 video out. It's really really strong. So I don't know. I would kind of push back on the idea that this is a bad value necessarily. I think people are used to one model for phone games, and this is just another model for phone games, right? And if you don't like that, that's fine. But these are console titles, presumably being
Yeah.
delivered at good quality on a cell phone, which I think is very exciting and also something that people should be prepared to pay console prices for.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess that has there been any battery life tests with this?
Oh, I'm sure you'd only get like, judging from the wattage off the iPhone SoC, you probably get like 2 or 3 hours of screen on time with it. But
That
yeah,
seems
so
pretty
like
good
kind
to
of
me.
like Switch-ish battery life, OG Switch-ish battery life, I'd presume.
Interesting stuff. Yeah, I guess we're going to be looking at that now. You've got the hardware. We'll be looking at that as soon as we get access to the game. Which
Yeah.
I'm interested about the video output. You talk about uncompressed 4K 60, but surely the games are being scaled, right?
Yeah, the games aren't running at 4K 60. They're
No.
basically running by default in the exact same mode as you get on the iPhone. So that means you get kind of like this ultra wide presentation
Right.
on a television screen with a bit of letterboxing, sort of like a 21:9 scale image. It's roughly in that vicinity in terms of the aspect ratio.
Right, but
So it is a proper square image, but
Right.
it is a letterbox a little bit. But it's actually sort of interesting as a kind of hybrid console to me. I was thinking about this a little bit recently because it's a good console on the go. It's sort of like a Switch. And then you plug it into a TV, and it really is just so easy with any of the dongles I've tested. It's a perfect 4K 60 output if the dongle supports it. And then you get a really good experience on the TV, and it's so much more powerful than a Nintendo Switch.
Yeah.
Like the same games, Fortnite, Wreckfest 2 I was testing, all these games running so much better than they would in their Switch versions, right? So that's a little bit exciting, even though the variety of games is relatively limited. It's so much more powerful than what Nintendo can deliver at the moment.
Yeah, the whole pricing thing I find is a bit baffling. I mean, you can be dropping $1,000, $1,500 on a phone, but you don't want to pay for the games. So, meanwhile, you spend like $400, $500 on a PlayStation 5, and you're ponying up $70 a time. So yeah, it's baffling, but there it is. But yeah, I think from a Digital Foundry perspective, I mean, we're really excited to actually just see the deployment of ultra modern mobile silicon playing AAA games. We want to see what it does, right? And
Right.
how it compares to the other platforms. And yeah, I'd like to see more games, obviously. Just to, just for my own personal curiosity to see what the iOS silicon can do. And obviously, Apple have been doing a huge amount of work in terms of, modernizing their whole development ecosystem. And I love the idea that, we're going to be seeing Metal FX AI upscaling on
Yeah,
the
right.
phone.
Yeah. I mean, it is right about up there with DLSS 2 in terms of quality, at least in No Man's Sky. It looks really, really good. And obviously, we saw Resident Evil Village on Mac. I covered that in October, I think, of last year. That obviously looked superb. So I think they are pushing that in a variety of titles. I think that's definitely the key to unlocking really good visuals on this class of hardware.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely.